Probably about the time I was going to bed, you were going to work. Who are any of our night crew in? All right. Well, folks, I do know, one, I appreciate you making the sacrifice. I know that's a lot. Like I said, I travel for work all the time, and I know just how tiring travel can be. So working and then hearing the drone of my voice on a Friday is probably like watching paint dry. So I appreciate you, all of you, coming in and kind of carving out time. Today, we're going to be talking about the subjects behind me, communication, teams, and customer-focused construction. Wow, that's a lot. They're actually all very integrated together. It's actually the next session that is not very well integrated, albeit they're all kind of building a story here, but we'll be talking about time management and financial management the next time. But then I can make the very poignant phrase, time is money, so see, it worked out. And yes, you're probably saying, but Greg, I thought this was financial management and time management. Well, that's because this guy right here is kind of an idiot. So I swapped the sessions. The good news is we only have 2 weeks, and you'll see me again. So we'll be seeing the end of this movie at some point in time. So this one is all about how to communicate effectively, where we maybe fall down in communicating. We're also going to be talking about building strong teams, something Darcy said just a few moments ago that I heard her talking. We have kind of cross-functional teams here. Probably we have some from estimating, some from project management, some administrative folks. We have project management. We even have a canine corps, which I'm so excited. This is my 15 years. I've never had a canine, and I am a dog lover, so this is outstanding. I just wish he liked me more, but the day is still young.
Biscuit.
Yeah, Biscuit and Chicken over here. I'm sure I'll be the top dog. But so the whole concept of creating these teams starts with us. But teams are more than that, especially for Benning, where we do a lot of work with a lot of trade partners. So trade contractors of all makes and models, they're part of our team. Customers are part of our team, which then brings us to the third part of this story, which is customer-focused construction. You all are a very customer-centric organization. I was telling a few of you already, I follow you on social media, on LinkedIn. For those of you that don't know what that is, you actually have a presence out there on LinkedIn, and I follow it, and I see all your amazing stories of customer successes and wins, and more importantly, your raving fans. Folks that just say, I gotta have Benning on this project because they are top notch. And that's kind of exciting because I think, to me, when you break it all down, having these raving fans are going to be very important for the longevity of Benning for the long haul. A lot of companies talk about customer service, but I don't think they understand what it means. One quick thing, customer service does not mean going to Braves games, taking customers to lunch, and swag, meaning giving them stuff, like the bins of shirts back there. That's called marketing, and that's a different thing. In fact, customer service is what everybody in this room is solely responsible for. That doesn't mean giving in on change orders. That doesn't mean rolling over and not having difficult conversations with customers. At the end of the day, it's an interesting thing to think about, but Walmart, I'm sure we've all shopped at Walmart before. I'm not a big Walmart fan just because I don't like big crowds. So, but you go in there, and what is Walmart's mantra? What do they kind of talk about all the time?
Price.
Low price, get the lowest prices. And some people criticize them because maybe they kind of squish their competition a little too much, or their supply chain. But it's fascinating. Here's the low-cost provider. That's what they're all predicated on. Yet, what is the first thing you see when you walk into a Walmart?
The greeter.
The greeter. It's usually some octogenarian, old lady, old man, standing there kind of, would you like a buggy? And they'll kind of give you your buggy. And they make you feel, welcome to Walmart. And you just go, I feel so good to be here. the point is, here is a low-cost provider that the first thing they do is make you feel welcome. Now, how do we do that? Can we also provide a good value to our customers and do it nicely? And the point that I'm going to make throughout today is customer service shouldn't cost you a thing. It almost seems like heresy to go, what? No, that's impossible. But remember, we're not talking about the Braves tickets or taking clients out to dinners and lunches. This is about listening to your customer. It's about talking to your customer. It's about learning about the people around you. A good segue kind of summarizes all of this together and also maybe reintroduces me to a few of the new faces we have in the room today. First, my name is Gregg Schoppman. For those of you I didn't get to meet the last two times, I come from an organization called FMI. I run the Florida operation of FMI, of which we have 5 offices. I tell you that because 15 years ago is when I started with FMI. Seemed like just yesterday. And actually, I was talking to a client last night on the phone, and there's always a point in everyone's career where you kind of look behind you and go, wow, I'm no longer the young guy anymore. And I kind of had that cathartic moment a couple weeks ago. I looked at FMI and I had a lot of millennials, guys. We had one guy that even had the hair bun, thing. And I'm like, okay, I am now officially the old guy in the room. That being said, I came from a company in Central Florida previously that actually, I forget who worked for Arco Murray. Which one of you, Darcy, who worked for Arco Murray?
Darcy.
Who worked for Arco
taking
Murray?
care of videography.
She's my AV person, so.
Who worked for whom?
Arco, who worked for, didn't you have a person here that worked for Arco at one point in time? It's irrelevant, but that was the company I worked for before. They have an office down in Tampa, Florida. I know they have an office up here in Atlanta doing a lot of cold storage, but I worked there for 7 years. Prior to that, I worked for a heavy civil firm in Lakeland, Florida, home to your Publix client. But when I worked for that heavy civil contractor, I did DOT work. It was brutal. If you've ever done DOT or government work, pretty much you wake up in the morning, you put on the boxing gloves, you go to the octagon, and you spend 8 or 9 hours duking it out with subcontractors, the state of Florida, as well as any inspecting firm, and it's just brutal. And I said, it's not really for me. I can't do that for the rest of my life. It's not my DNA. So I went to work for Arco. Arco was a little bit different. They're what I would consider a very customer-centric organization. So my boss, his name was Greg, ironically, he said, Greg, I know you come from a DOT, ground and pound, fighting environment. He goes, I want you to meet our best customer service ambassador in our company. I was like, okay, who's that? He goes, it's a guy named Doug, and Doug is one of our superintendents. I was like, okay, that's not what I would have thought, but we'll give it a shot. He goes, I want you to go out and spend a day with Doug, and he's going to tell you all about customer service. It's like, I always had kind of equated in my mind that customer service was playing golf and going to lunches, all the things, that Channing does on a regular basis. Tell him I said that too. So I had it in my mind that's what I was going to be doing. So I go out to this job site. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. It was for a printed circuit board manufacturer. The name of the company is Jabil. If you know that area, it's kind of a really low area, kind of in a marshy spot, and that's part of one of the elements of the story. So I go up and meet Doug. And Doug, first I go to his trailer. His trailer looks like, and I'm trying to find the best way to explain this. You know when you go to like those model home communities and they have their job site trailer, but it's a fully skirted trailer. It had American flag and the company flag out front. It just looked different than a typical construction trailer. It looked welcoming, I guess that's the only way I could say it. I walked in, the trailer was spotless. I mean, it was fully carpeted, which I was like, wow, that's weird, fully carpeted, all the mud in Florida. Well, it's because he vacuumed it every single day to keep it clean. It looked like a business office, not a typical construction office. It was, once again, a very welcoming environment. And you know how William Scotsman trailers, I don't even know if that's what they call them anymore, but they have kind of that center area, conference center, and then office on either side, and like a restroom. Well, one of the other side of the trailer, it said Jabel's office. Now, he wasn't required to have a customer office on site like a lot of projects do, but he had set up a spot where his client could come out. If they wanted to spend the day with him, they could come and sit and plop down and work in there. And he set it up for them with a data line and a phone line and even a fax line, which tells how dated the story is. His side of the office was pristine, organized, structured. Once again, he looked like he knew what he was doing. So he takes me out. Now Doug, just to put this in context, Doug is 6'8". He's about 380 pounds. He's a big dude. And he comes out, he goes, Greg, let's hop in the Gator, and we're gonna go drive out, and we're gonna go out and look at the site for a little bit. So sure. So we're driving, and the first person we come to is the tilt contractor. And it's the guy, he's the foreman of the job, he's a Hispanic gentleman. And Doug said, oh, before we go too much further, I want you to meet Jose. So we go up, we pull up, we meet Jose. And Jose didn't speak very good English, but Doug said to me, he goes, this guy right here, he's the bee's knees. I mean, he is the real deal when it comes to superintendents for this tilt company. You want him on all your jobs. He laid out the tilt panels in such a way that saved us a week on the schedule. He is really, really good. And then that Jose kind of nods a little bit, and he knew Doug wasn't yelling at him, so that was good. So we hop back in the Gator, and we start driving around the job site. We come across the site contractor. And as I said, this is in St. Petersburg. The water table is about a foot below the topsoil. I mean, that's how low we actually were. So he goes, oh, before we go too much further, I gotta have you meet our site contractor. Okay. And we'll call him Billy Bob. He kind of looked like a Billy Bob to me now that I think about it. He's up on this big excavator, and he goes, hey, you know, Greg, if you're ever working in this area, obviously got a low water table, he goes, you know, Billy Bob knew about the soil in this spot of St. Petersburg, so he dug a rim ditch, which allows us to kind of have all the water flow. I'm not going to explain all the hydrology, but he goes, we were able to not have to well point and do dewatering because of his technique, and it saved us probably about 30 or 40 grand. And, you know, Billy Bob kind of spits a lot of chew out on the ground and said, thank you, Doug. And, you know, we hop back in the Gator, and just about that time, the client pulls up. We'll call him Mr. Jabel. Actually, his name was Bill Andre. He pulls up on the job site. Now, keeping in mind, in my previous life, everything was a fight with the state of Florida. My boss actually, well, I can't even repeat the things he said to the state of Florida because that's how vulgar my previous boss was. So lo and behold, Doug sees the customer. Guy gets out of his car, he walks up to him and gives him the biggest bear hug I've ever seen in my life. And I'm going, wow, that's really strange, you know. I mean, he goes, Greg, you gotta meet Bill. Bill, they start talking for about 30 to 45 minutes about everything but construction. They were talking about, you know, the Rays and the Lightning and sports and Bill's vacation. And Doug is like, that's great, Bill. And you could just tell he was genuinely interested in Bill's life. Then finally, it came to the comment about change orders. And I remember all my previous experience with change orders. Actually, we'll call them claims and lawsuits. That's actually how it probably is better quantified when you work with the state of Florida. And Bill Andre says, hey, I got a question about this change order the office sent me. So Doug goes, hey, let's go walk the job site real quick. And he goes, well, here's the reason why it costs what it costs. And he spent about, let's say 15 minutes walking through everything relative to why we were doing what we were doing, what the costs were, what had to be done to put all this work in place. They were adding an extra bay for a tool crib area. And then Bill said something I thought I would never hear in my life in construction. And that's all it costs? Have you ever had that? Your client says, oh, that's all you're charging me? I sat there and said, you got to be kidding me. Well, at the end of that, we were there a little bit longer. Bill Andre kind of drives away. We kind of, he gave me a little more of the tour, and then I hopped in my car. I left that job site in St. Petersburg, never got a free lunch, never got to play golf. I even had my golf clubs in the car thinking that's what we're going to do. Yet I had probably one of the greatest customer service examples from what I refer to this day as the greatest salesman-tendant I've ever seen. And that's what we mean by customer service. Nothing Doug did was out of the ordinary. Nothing Doug did really cost his company any money, or my old company for that matter, any money. What he did was did all the things that customers want. Proactive communication. They want to feel involved. I get it, folks. There are folks that are tough to love. Just like just anybody in this world, there are some people that make it really hard to like them. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of folks we just haven't found ways to reach yet. But even how Doug interacted with the subcontractors. He never looked down his nose at anybody. He never treated anyone badly. In fact, he kind of recognized, we're not self-performing anything on this job. Our success at Arco Murray was all about the trade contractors. If we didn't have them, we're nothing. Just like Benning to some extent. You don't self-perform a lot, if anything, in some of your jobs. It's all about the trade partners that you get. And involving them as a team, communicating with them as a team. Those are the things we want to focus on. And as I said already, there are tough people to love. There are tough people to communicate with. But think of it as a challenge to say, you know what, I just haven't figured the right thing yet. One of the things we are going to do a little bit later today, how many of you have taken a personality profile before? Raise your hand. How accurate was that personality profile? Yeah, it's, once again, just like anything else, to some extent, I don't blame the tests. You're the one answering the question, so hopefully it's fairly accurate. We're going to do something today. One, this is hopefully reinforce any personality profiles you've done in the past, with Benning or in a previous life. This one is called DISC. It's no different than ProScan, Myers-Briggs, you name it. There's a zillion out there. This is going to be less about you, though. This is about reading other people. Some of you, just looking around the room, have lived with your personality for a long time. I can tell you, my wife, when we'll talk about, she'll say, "What did you do today with Benning?" I said, we did DISC. She says, "Oh boy, did you tell him all the things?" I gave her the DISC one time. That was what we call malpractice on my part. I probably should never have given my wife this test, because she came out and she was I think a D personality, which we'll explain what that means a little later. She's like, "Why are you saying that? Why am I a D?" And I'm like, holy mackerel, I'm just telling you the story. And it was probably one of those things I shouldn't have done. But the moral of this story is, it's not about you. You've lived with your personality for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You know what you are. It's about everybody else in this room that we need to figure out. And if you have a customer in front of you that has a certain personality, if they're a D and you're a C, are we that far apart, or have I just not found the right way to communicate with that person quite just yet? So once again, everything about the personality test today is to kind of get us thinking about not you, but about the other person, about your team, about your customers. Before we go too much further though, some of you have done a homework assignment for me. I know, I assigned homework. Oh boy, how could we possibly give you homework on a Friday? So, if you remember our last session, it was all related to operations. And we left where a few of you kind of raised your hand and said, I will take that, I will own it, and more importantly, we're going to go and figure out how to Benningize those tools. the pre-construction planning, short-term planning, exit strategy, post-job review. Yes, ma'am.
For some folks that weren't here
Yep.
during that last one, can you just kind of give an
Absolutely.
overview to?
Absolutely. So one of the things in the operations section we talked about was processes, tools, and accountability. And construction projects have 5 critical processes. Those are pre-construction planning. That's everything from the time we're awarded a job till the time we actually mobilize. Short interval planning, which is how we plan week to week. Daily huddle, which is, go figure, daily planning. Exit strategy, which is, for lack of a better word, we'll call it the 2-minute warning. When we get to 80 to 90% on a project, that's where we kind of dig into pre-job planning, the last 10% of the project. And then lastly, the post-job review. Lessons learned, post-mortem, autopsy. Why is it always got to be a dead people? The idea of capturing those lessons learned about subs, about best practices, about clients, and making the institution of Benning smarter as a whole. So those are the 5 critical processes, and where we left last week was, or excuse me, last session, was not that we're broken by any stretch, but we said, we maybe in different areas have some improvements we can make. So part of that session, I walked through what I would call the best practices. This is the ultimate example of what your process should look like. Now, just like anything, you have to customize it. So there were 4 of you, and you might say, well, Greg, I thought you said there was 5 processes. Why do we only have 4 people? What I did was kind of combined the short interval planning and daily huddle together to kind of make it a little bit easier. And as a follow-up to that session, I sent Darcy a very large email with about a zillion samples of all makes and models, and then the champions. Those are the folks that raised their hand and said, I want to try to Benningize this. I want to put our spin on it. And what does that look like? That's where we went ahead and those folks were kind of leading the charge, so to speak. And from what I understand, some of those folks aren't here right now, and that's okay. There are other folks that are here that are actually on those teams. So just as a recap, for the pre-job planning, we had Nick was doing all things pre-job planning. Short interval was Todd Dozier, who I understand is not here. Exit strategy, Anthony or Andy Long. Why do we call him Andy when his name's Anthony again?
Everybody calls him Anthony except for me because that's what his dad called him, and he told me that when I first interviewed him, so I can't shake it.
Gotcha.
Yes.
It's just nice and confusing, but
Right.
okay. And then post-job was Brad Mitchell. So, obviously, my expectation for today was not that you would be done with this stuff. In fact, this is an evolution, not a revolution. But I wanted you to at least start some things. So, and I know, as I said, I think there's only a few of you here right now. There's been progress on all 4 of these initiatives. But Nick, maybe just to kind of kick us off, if you would mind, I'll give you the floor just from give us a snapshot of where you are, how things are going, so on and so forth.
I didn't know there was going to be a follow-up one, so we went through the whole thing and got a good way, we believe, to work.
Mm-hmm.
So when, do you guys have a timeline? Because every group can do it differently, so there doesn't need to be multiple layers or multiple meetings. Do you all have a timeline when you might have a first draft done?
I got it right here, if you like pen and paper.
All right.
That's fine.
Sounds good.
But do I need to put it on a computer or something?
No, I just wanted you to kind of share with the group, because what I didn't want people to feel like was we had that discussion, people kind of own the groups or own the processes, but we never talk about it ever again.
Oh, so you want me to go through it?
Yeah, just maybe the quick highlights, the snapshot, that's all.
All right, well, we decided we're going to keep the bid decisions between the executives because we don't see a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But after we bid the job and it's awarded, we decided a good idea was for the PM to get with the estimator and the PM write the Article 1 under the estimator's supervision so that we can tell them what is included and what is not included. And then going beyond that is going to be a pre-job meeting with the executives, and that would be after the PM gets a schedule, the schedule of values, all the buyout, and then go through it with the whatever executive's in charge on that job. And after their approval, we'll have an on-site pre-job meeting, because I had a superintendent in our discussion as well, and he was saying how Benning has a bad habit of not letting the super finish a job and just throwing them on another one. And so when they get out there, they don't have time to come in the office. So we'll do an on-site pre-job meeting with him the first day he's out there, and go over the contracts briefly, but more or less go over the plans and what's included in the job. Because one thing Benning fails to do is, as I was told, is the supers will get out there and the grader knows more than he does. So get him up to speed on that, and then the job starts. But a couple key points is that we have a bad habit of when the owner pulls the trigger, I mean, he wants it tomorrow or he wanted it yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So we scurry, and we have a PM that we've listed on the bid form and a super that we've listed on the bid form, but it all changes, and that's real unprofessional to the owner. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the pre-job meeting, is to nail down who's going to be the PM and who's going to be the super, and they're going to take the job from day one talking to the owner. And we're going to have like a turnover meeting. So Lane usually talks to the owners, my boss, and for a good transition, so the owners, like you said, customer service will have a get together with the PM and then Lane and the owner. Mm-hmm. That way the PM's just not calling them up like, hey, I'm your PM type
Right.
deal. Another thing that we would like to see is the PMs and the supers do the job start to finish. That's just what we came up with.
Who's going to attend the meeting on the site with the superintendent? Who's going to be required to go there?
The PM and the estimator.
Good stuff.
And then we got a monthly email from future and past bids, because point was brought up that a lot of supers that are out in the field don't know exactly what we bid on. And so we were going to start sending out what we've been bidding on, what we've been awarded, and what's in the future that we're going to bid on. Because all the super C is the 900 Publixes and the couple government jobs we got going.
Gotcha. That's outstanding. Who was on your team? Did you have a group of people?
Yeah.
You mentioned we a couple times.
It was me, the Johnson brothers, Big John,
Lane,
Nick Donahue, and Tony.
Let's give him a hand, because that's, to be honest with you, I don't say this lightly. You guys have day jobs. What you guys just did was work on the business. You putting bids together is working in the business, and that's what we do. I mean, we put bids together, we supervise jobs, we manage work. Wrenching on the engine and kind of creating a better Benning is exactly what that group did. And that's how organizations get better. So great stuff, Nick. I appreciate you doing that. Obviously, it's a journey, not a destination. There's still probably a lot of work to be done, and once again, sticking with it. Like I said, I can buy the gym membership, but really the power of that gym is going to said gym.
Tom Carr was in my group too.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, we didn't forget about you there.
And one thing we brought up, and it was a discussion at first, because it was the Benning way, it was a point that was brought up of, well, if it's just another Publix or it's just another Aldi, it's kind of repetitive to keep the same thing. And the counterpoint to that was, it may be repetitive, but once you break the process once, then it's broken forever.
Right.
So we were going to, no matter how repetitive it is, we'd like to keep the same process over and over again. That way the owner sees that we are professional.
Yeah, that's a great example, and it's probably a great segue to this customer-focused discussion. I'm sure everybody in this room has had this situation where, or maybe Nick, you hear this, we'll give you this Publix job in Tampa, Florida, if Steve Smith is the superintendent. We only want Steve Smith. And, it's that preferred, they like Steve or John or Mary or whoever, it's irrelevant. And I know I've been part of that where it's like, we'll give you this job only if Greg can do it or one of my colleagues. Well, the question becomes, why does that happen? At first, we think that's a good thing. We kind of go, well, Greg must be a great superintendent or project manager or whatever. The reality, though, is it because I have a sterling personality and people just like me? Or am I doing it that different than everybody else? And more often than not, it's this stuff here. You'll ask the customer, why do you want Steve on the job? Well, it's because, he sends me weekly updates, or he keeps me in the loop, or we have a kickoff meeting. Your other guys don't do that. That's not the Benning way. And once again, if you do a lot of Publixes, and as Darcy and I said, was that Publixes or Publixi? We're not really sure. But the question of, if we have customers that we're working with, but you touch them, you touch them, you touch them, you touch them, they don't want to go, oh, wow, it just feels different every time we touch them. And the example that I used was the Starbucks cup of coffee or the Starbucks way of doing things. Making sure that we have a universal, model every single time. So the point that I wanted to say was, having that standardized approach, that Benning way. Hey, I'd love for all of you to be in demand because you do have that sterling personality. That's what we want to kind of focus on. So, who else was active on a team? I know we have Todd. He's not here. Was anyone on Todd's team? Bueller? How about on Andy's team on the exit strategy?
We met yesterday.
Oh, okay. So you're also on that team. God, you're getting like double duty here. So, any exit strategy? Maybe the 20-second version of this.
I wasn't the organizer in that one.
Okay.
So,
Okay, no problem. I'm in training today.
if anybody else that was in there has anything to add.
Well, to be honest with you, and maybe I'll chime in just for a moment. So the concept of exit strategy, I know we've used the word a couple times. Well, we maybe fall down in this. This process is probably what Gregg and FMI hears the most from your customers. This is industry-wide, not Benning specific. So most companies don't finish strongly. They don't finish on a good note. A little bit because of what you said, which was we shift resources at the end of the job. So think about it. What do your customers remember? How you start or how you finish? It's how you finish. Yet, how do we finish? Well, we yank this guy off and we put a rookie out on the job site for the last 10%. And then we stub our toe, and then we wonder why customers get frustrated or ticked off or what have you. So that's why the exit strategy, that Benning finish, to where we just execute and crush it at the end of a job. Anyone from a post job? Lesson learned? Well, in our last session, hopefully we'll get those 3 people back because I do want a stand and deliver from them and an update. Because like I said, that's to me the things that we want to continue to reinforce. These are the processes. This is the way we need to live at Benning to drive better conclusions and most importantly, better finished product. So, without further ado, now we're going to get into it. So, today we're going to be talking about these things. I've already mentioned them a few times, so I'm not going to bore you. So, probably, I almost feel like I'm a Debbie Downer here, but I think to begin with, we have to kind of isolate what are we solving for? What are the things that we are, in fact, not doing well? Not necessarily us personally at Benning or even you, but this phrase up here, what leads to, or what inhibits create communication. Take a moment and kind of jot all the things down that lead to bad communication. And if you don't have a pen, because I saw I have a pen.
Oh, I can go get a bunch of pens. I got some.
Here's a pen, sir. I saw you. I hope it. Well, I don't know if it works, but we'll give it a shot.
Thank you.
Oh, this is bad. That is bad.
He's on the table for you.